Well, it's a pleasure to have been invited to speak to you at this year's Last Days Bible Conference. It would have been great to meet in person. I would have loved to see the Canadian Rockies and to meet all of you individually. But apparently, like last year, it had to be canceled. This year, we're having to do some different options. I'm going to talk to you today. I'm going to tie a little bit about Bible prophecy together for you. My title, and each week I do a prophecy update at Fellowship Bible Chapel, usually one a week. Occasionally I'll do one in the middle of the week just because there are so many things happening that I think are converging together that indicate we live near the time that the Lord's going to return, and we're going to have this period of time on earth known as the 70th week of Daniel. I'll explain a little bit about that in a moment. I've been doing this for over 20 years at Fellowship Bible Chapel. We've been doing it for 8. So the title of my talk today is Deplatforming Humanity, the Great Revealing of the Great Setup. I'll explain that in more detail as we go through this. So I'm going to do a little bit of a setup as to sort of the prophetic grid that I interpret things through based on how I understand the scriptures. Then we'll talk about the specific example of this thing, this deplatforming humanity that's coming that I think ties into the beast system. It was about 10 years ago, January of 2011, that Time magazine came out with this cover on the left, 2045, the year man becomes immortal. A lot of us who follow Bible prophecy, we immediately seized on that. And we wondered, what is going on? How did this come about? And they were talking about the singularity. And I think they've actually advanced the time frame in the last 10 years from 2045 to 2030, because as we'll see, things are happening more and more quickly. The other title on the right, Can Google Solve Death? That came out about a year later. And then just in the last week, this Youngblood title, Silicon Valley is out to hack the process of aging. So the people that are in the tech and science and biology spheres, they have big plans. They want to make man immortal. Now the theme is this conference, for I have not shunned to declare unto you the whole counsel of God. That's based on this meeting that Paul had with the Ephesian elders at Miletus. He wasn't able to go to Ephesus, and so he sent for the elders and he had them come to Miletus, and he talked a little bit. He sort of summarized his ministry. He said, I've never withheld anything from you, and you know that I've been preaching to you that about the Lord Jesus and the grace of God. And then he says, and now behold, I know that ye all, among whom I have gone preaching the kingdom of God, shall see my face no more. Wherefore I take you to record this day that I am pure from the blood of all men. And then he says, for I have not shunned, I did not shrink to declare unto you all the counsel of God. Take heed, therefore, unto yourselves and to all the flock over which the Holy Ghost hath made you overseers, to feed the church of God, which he hath purchased with his own blood, because something very serious was going to be coming. He said, for I know this, that after my departing shall grievous wolves enter in among you, not sparing the flock. Also of your own selves shall men arise, speaking perverse things, to draw away disciples after them. Therefore watch and remember that by the space of 3 years I cease not to warn every one of you night and day with tears. So Paul talks about, I declared unto you all the counsel of God, and one of the parts of the counsel of God, the church, now certainly you that are at a prophecy conference, you don't ignore this topic, and the speakers at this conference don't ignore this topic. But a lot of the church will ignore the topic, this part of the counsel of God that deals with Bible prophecy. Now, we at Fellowship Bible Chapel, we talk about it every week. We try to look at current events because we think we live in a very unique time. Time will tell. But certainly, it is difficult to understand and grasp what's going on. Who would have predicted 2020 in late 2019? Who would have predicted 2021 in 2020? Things have not improved. Remember the old saying that when this COVID thing started, 15 days to flatten the curve. Well, how has that worked out now that we're more than a year and 15 days into this thing, and the lockdowns and problems continue. And there are problems. Listen to Fellowship Bible Chapel, our pastor who we loved, and one of my closest friends passed away from COVID in late September last year. So we know the reality of this disease maybe more than anyone else. But the world is still reeling from this, and it doesn't seem to be getting better. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit, just sort of set up my grid that I go through when I talk about this. I call it the prophecy ACLU: acceleration, convergence, logistics, and understanding. We live in a very unique time. You know, what happened at the time of the first coming of Christ will be recapitulated. The pattern will exist in the end. And so here were the disciples. They were seeing all these things. Jesus was speaking to them in parables. But then he said, listen, folks, you, my disciples, blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. You had just talked about a prophecy in Isaiah. For verily I say unto you that many prophets and righteous men have desired to see those things which ye see and have not seen them, and to hear those things which ye hear and have not heard them. So we live at this time of history where, as difficult as it is from time to time, and I see people saying all the time, I want to be out of here. I want the Lord to come. I want to be taken home to the Lord. You know, we need to occupy until he comes. But we're at a time where we should consider ourselves blessed that we live at a time when we have the Scripture to give us an idea of the things that are coming. And we're going to have a better understanding. Now, this is an eye chart. I personally am nearsighted. This is what I see when I go to look at an eye chart. I can get the E, but I only get the E because I've memorized it from the prior visit. I can remember one letter at my age. But as I get closer to that chart, everything becomes clear, even without my glasses, because I'm getting closer to the target. That's what's going to happen here in the end times. As we get closer to the time when these things are going to be completely fulfilled, we're going to see things. So let's look at a couple of these things. Acceleration. So we know that Bible prophecy is a pattern. Things are going to accelerate. Things are going to happen quickly, and they're going to seem to happen all at once. We have a pattern. At the time of the first coming of Jesus Christ, there were many Bible prophecies, some over 2,000 years old, that talked about what was going to happen at the first coming of Christ. But when we analyze those prophecies and their fulfillment, we find that about 60% of them, actually about 58%, 59%, were fulfilled in the last week of Jesus' life. So what you see there was this prophecy, they all accelerated and converged at one time. And that's going to be the way it is. You know, and The Sun Also Rises, a couple characters of Hemingway, and I'm not suggesting that Hemingway is scripture, but I think it's a very significant thing, or it's a significant conversation that took place between two characters. And one of the questions was, how did you go bankrupt? And the answer was, well, two ways: gradually, then suddenly. And again, I think that's a picture of what's going to happen. These things that are going to be fulfilled, they're going to be building up over time. They don't happen overnight. You don't, for example, whatever your view is of the final Babylon, if that has to be rebuilt in Iraq, that's not going to happen overnight. Look at Dubai. It took 30 years for Dubai to be built. Now, things might happen more quickly now, but it's still going to take a while. And we're going to see, I think, the beginnings of these things happening. And we're going to see a convergence. Now, my view of the seal judgments is that, you know, the seals open in sequence, but they have a progressive effect. For example, the first seal, rider on the white horse goes forth conquering and to conquer. He does it, it says he goes forth and conquered everything. He's conquering and to conquer. So there's a process, and it builds over time. It gets more intense. Same way with the second, third, and fourth seals. They don't happen overnight. And so I don't think the first seal will be complete before the second seal, the effects of the first seal will be complete before the second, third, and fourth seals open. And I think there's going to be this progression where they're going to get more and more intense. And we know at the sixth seal, even the people on the earth say, okay, now we understand, now we get it. We understand what's going on. So again, there's going to be this progression, and these things are going to converge. They're going to happen at the same time. So we do this. This is a graphic I use every week in my talks about little things of Bible prophecy and history, days of Noah, days of Lot, things that are going to happen in the end times. We even get a pattern from in the upper left-hand corner, the second panel in Hebron. What happened in Hebron? I did a talk on that a number of years ago. Went there to the cave of Machpelah. Incredible. And there's a picture, a pattern that the Jews will be fulfilled in the end times about the reconciliation of Jacob and Esau that happened at the time the burial of Abraham, or burial of Isaac at Hebron. So again, Jesus even talks about it. So in Matthew chapter 24, verse 33, so likewise, when you see all these things, so there's going to be a lot of things happening. They're going to be happening all at once. They're going to be accelerating. They're going to be converging. We know that this will happen with Bible prophecy. Now the Spirit expressly speaketh expressly, 1 Timothy chapter 4, excuse me. Now the Spirit speaketh expressly that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. There's going to be a progression of this end-time apostasy and falling away. It's not going to happen overnight. I liken the apostasy to this, and I'll talk more about that in my other talk on one particular aspect. This bucket of apostasy is going to be filled to the point where it's going to overflow and flood. In 2 Timothy chapter 3, it says, this know that in the last days perilous times shall come. Perilous times shall be coming. For the time will come in 2 Timothy 4 when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lust shall heap to themselves teachers having itching ears. You see the heaping. You don't make a heap in one shovelful. You have to pile it up. And so we're going to see this piling up of false teaching. It's going to happen. The other aspect that I look at in these Bible prophecies is logistics. I think it's an aspect that's overlooked. One aspect is demographics. I don't even have a slide on. Do you know that by 2050, it's estimated that among China, because of one-child policies and abortion and selective abortion in India and China, between those two countries, the most populous ones on the planet, that there will be somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 million marriage-age men that will have no chance for a female spouse. This will have huge implications on society, culture, and it's not going to be 200 million suddenly in 2050. It's going to be it's already in the millions. This has huge implications from a geopolitical standpoint. In Ezekiel chapter 38, we know it says here, and thou shalt come from thy place out of the north parts, thou and many people with thee, all of them riding upon horses, a great company, a mighty army. So what we know is that there will be these countries that will exist that will be anti-Israel, and they will join in a coalition. So the countries are going to have to be there, and they're going to have an army. They're going to have a great company, and they're going to have to be a mighty army. They're going to have equipment. So I'm not inclined, as sometimes I see happen, people like, well, somebody in Syria sneezed and Hezbollah sneezed, and therefore Ezekiel 38 is happening tomorrow. Whenever that happens in the sequence, and there's a lot of controversy about that, there's going to be indicators, going to be a building up process that takes place. The U.S., when it went into Iraq in 1991, the most powerful nation on earth, the most logistically capable nation on earth, took it 6 months to build up its army to invade across a pretty flat desert and with an army that was not very good. So there's a logistical aspect to that, a great company and a mighty army. We also see this with regard to the prophecy about the mark of the beast and the beast system that's going to come, mentioned in Revelation 13. He causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their forehead. So listen, we know that this is something that it says all, both small and great. So it's going to be universal. It's going to come about, but it's going to have a logistical aspect to it. It's going to have some kind of technology. So there's been speculation since Hal Lindsey's book, particularly since Hal Lindsey's book came out back in 1969 or 70, over the last 50 years, as to what the mark of the beast is going to be. We've had barcodes, chips, that type of thing. And now here in 2020, suddenly we have something totally different in terms of a system that's being put in place that I think will lead to it. And then we also have this thing in my prophecy grid, my ACLU grid, that talks about understanding, or that looks at understanding. Because like the eye chart, as we get closer, we're going to understand. Jesus himself mentions this in Matthew chapter 24, verse 15. He says, when ye therefore see. So now he's going to tell us some of the things that you are going to see. When you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet. So one thing there is, we know Jesus pretty much settles who wrote the book of Daniel. It was Daniel the prophet. But then he talks about the abomination of desolation, and we know from other passages in Daniel and 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 that I think the most common understanding that there's some kind of temple, tabernacle, some kind of structure where worship will take place on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Well, that's not going to happen overnight, and we see the beginnings of it. I mean, a lot of us have been to the Temple Institute, and we've seen the temple instruments that have been made. We see practice sacrifices now. We see articles and videos about the red heifer. We see architectural drawings and plans for the temple that are there. There are construction plans in place. There are logistics in place to bring this about. In our time, at this time, things are accelerating, converging. The logistics are there, and we're having understanding. And Daniel goes on and talks about this in Daniel chapter 32. And such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt by flatteries, but the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits, and they that understand among the people shall instruct the many. There's going to be these people, this group. I did a talk called the masculine, the wise who understand. And Daniel chapter 12 says this, and they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever. But thou, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. Now, I think this is one of those passages which has a surface meaning and a deeper meaning. I think we can all agree people are running to and fro. Well, they were running to and fro until the COVID lockdowns came about. Travel was at an all-time record high, things that people had never seen. But knowledge will increase, and data and knowledge is incredible. I mean, I've had cases as an attorney where I've had over 40 million pages of documents in our database to review. I do cases. I used to do a case for 2 years, and I would have 25 or 30 letters that I've written in the case. Now I do a case. I have hundreds of pleadings. I have thousands of emails about a case. I've had cases where I get 200 emails a day on that case. We'd never get 200 letters back in the day. So there has been this increase of knowledge, but I think it's a deeper meaning in that it means that people will go to and fro, back and forth through the book, through the holy book, through these prophetic scriptures, and their knowledge of these prophetic scriptures and how they're going to work out exactly will happen. And I think Daniel also in Daniel 12 supports this, Daniel chapter 12, verse 8. And I heard, but I understood not. Then said I, O my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? And he said, Go thy way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Many shall be purified and made white and tried, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, but the wise shall understand. So Daniel himself says, I don't get it. And the Lord says, sealed up till the time of the end. The wicked won't get it, but the wise will understand. So I think that we're going to be living in a time, I think we're living in the time right now where the wise will understand. We need to be looking at these things. We need to be looking at them through the lens of Bible prophecy and understanding that the acceleration, the convergence, the logistics, and the understanding is all happening at the same time. And these systems are going to be used to ultimately fulfill Bible prophecy are going to be well in place. So as Jesus said, when you see. Now, we don't know what the mark is, but certainly it would seem that what we're seeing right now is at least a dry run. So we have this, deplatforming humanity. Let's talk about this in the time remaining, and this will be very quick, believe me. We could do hours and hours and hours on this. What is deplatforming humanity? So here the guy has his phone with his COVID passport, and it's red, so he gets knocked off his platform because obviously he doesn't have the right social credit score, and he is deplatformed. He's almost removed from being a human. This has very significant prophetic implications. How did this come about? About a year ago, on April 1st, I was, somebody sent me a link, and so I spent the better part of the day going through this website at the World Economic Forum called intelligence.weforum.org. And you have to sign up for an account to really navigate into it. It's free. Of course, they know you and they can track you, but at this point, I think privacy is pretty much of an illusion anywhere. But the World Economic Forum, which runs a conference called Davos each winter, they did not have it in 2021. They did have it in 2020. They get the elites of the world and global economics, geopolitics, political leaders, business leaders get together in Davos and they bat these ideas around. One of the ideas that had come about, and they developed this website, and for example, this section is based on a book that Klaus Schwab, the founder of the World Economic Forum, wrote called The Fourth Industrial Revolution, talking about what's happening. It really is a revolution that we're living through with the growth of artificial intelligence, data, monitoring, tracking, that sort of thing. It's incredible. So this website suddenly appeared. And it kind of almost looks like, with the rim around it, it almost looks like the coronavirus. But what it is, it's it's an amazing website. So April 1st, 2020, I did a video. And I said, this is something you need to look at, because I think this is the platform, the nerve center, the operating system for the beast system. This shows how they plan to go about this thing. There's no use hiding it anymore. Now, this website had been sort of kicking around in one form or another for a little while, but it really all congealed near the end of March last year when the world was going through all of these lockdowns. So the world goes through lockdowns, and all of a sudden, here is the World Economic Forum website. And so they have things, Fourth Industrial Revolution. They have things that you can link to, like values. And you see this, they have corporate governance. There's this thing called ESG. This is something that was unheard of in the law practice a few years ago. Now, all these big law firms have ESG practice groups where they advise clients, big corporate clients, on how they're supposed to act. What does ESG stand for? E, environment. S, societal. G, governance. So what has happened is there's been this radical shift from corporations focusing mainly on value and profits to shareholders to ESG to stakeholders, environment, societal, and governance to stakeholders, to society at large. And so now you see corporations coming out. Coke does these seminars on having people, you need to get rid of your whiteness. You have Major League Baseball moving the All-Star game from Georgia because they enacted some voter security laws. They move it to Colorado, where the voter security laws, by the way, are more strict than they are in Georgia. And the corporations think they can be involved in everything. Now, at some point, so they're woke. It's called being woke. And this thing happens, it comes into the church too, under critical race theory and wokeism and social justice. It's like a tsunami that's swept over the world. And it comes a lot from this World Economic Forum. So you have corporate governance, you have regulations and corporate, all these things are kind of converging together that they're looking at. Transnational actors, humanitarian action, global governance. That's a section that they have on this website. And everything, a lot of the topics are linked to global governance. So when Christians have been saying, well, there's one more world coming, one world government coming, global governance. Everybody says, you're a conspiracy theorist. You're crazy. They have a section on geopolitics, global health. And I think this is the one I'm going to focus on a little bit. I think this global health, this is where a lot of the convergence of things happens. And this is where I think is at least the beginnings of the beast system is coming together. Because everybody wants to be healthy. They even have the future of food. You think that's not relevant? Friday, President Biden in the United States, I call it the third Obama administration or the Biden administration, came out and said, we're going to have a target of 50% carbon emission reduction by 2030, less than 10 years. Even the New York Times, in the article talking about it, said this is going to have a huge impact on our society and culture and work, what people can do. There are going to be jobs lost. I don't know that I don't think they even believe that there will be jobs gained by doing away with a lot of things that deal with carbon. It's going to have a huge impact. One of the things people extrapolated out what it did with regard to food, and the determination was made that you're going to be limited to about 4 pounds of red meat per person per year. I'll say this, the Haller House will buy their own cow before we back off that much. That's 1 burger a month, by the way. Artificial intelligence is another area that's coming. It is seeping into everything. And then you also see these things on the World Economic Forum website about SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. There are about 30 of them. And they're all tied to what the UN's 2030 agenda is. That's sort of the new target date now. 2030 agenda is Sustainable Development Goals. And they talk about reshaping and remaking society. So last summer, in the midst of all this pandemic, the World Economic Forum launched a thing called the Great Reset. One of the speakers that talked about this, Prince Charles, was there, Klaus Schwab, the founder of the World Economic Forum, Antonio Guterres, then the Secretary General of the United Nations, talked about what does the Great Reset mean.
Human tragedy must be a wake-up call. It is imperative that we reimagine, rebuild, redesign, reinvigorate and rebalance our world. Rebalancing investment, harnessing science and technology, and advancing the transition to net zero emissions, all elements of the Great Reset, are fundamental to building the future we need.
And Time magazine came out with a magazine that said the Great Reset. It was right there for all to see. The same magazine that had 2045, the year man becomes immortal, said the Great Reset. We're going to reshape humanity. We're going to reshape the world. Even the Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, spoke about this last fall when he said this.
Pandemic has provided an opportunity for a reset. This is our chance to accelerate our pre-pandemic efforts to reimagine economic systems that actually address global challenges like extreme poverty, inequality, and climate change.
So he said, well, this is an opportunity for a great reset. Now, immediately, a lot of us in Bible prophecy said, see, I told you, even Justin Trudeau is talking about it. Even the Prime Minister of Canada. And immediately the New York Times and other websites came out and said, no, that's just a conspiracy theory. You guys are making way too much of this. Trudeau even defended himself against the charges that they wanted to take over a lot of things. This is what he said.
I think we're in a time of anxiety where people are looking for reasons for things that are happening to them, that the difficult moments we're in. It's nice to be able to try and find someone to blame, something to point to, something to get mad at. I think we're seeing a lot of people fall prey to disinformation. And if conservative MPs and others want to start talking about conspiracy theories, well, that's their choice. I'm going to stay focused on helping Canadians get through this, on learning lessons from this pandemic, and making sure that the world we leave to our kids is even better than the world we inherited from our parents.
And so Trudeau said this, and then it's, of course, it's all a conspiracy theory. You're misinterpreting. I'm just here to help the people. Also did a thing, some people in Canada sent me some things about COVID internment camps out of the province of Ontario, where it was a subject in the Ontario Parliament. And immediately everybody said, oh, that's just a conspiracy theory. We're not going to do that. Now we live in a world where Canada has COVID internment hotels. Okay, they're not COVID internment camps. They're hotels that are like a prison. What would you call them? It's not a conspiracy theory. This came, I think somebody made this up off of the World Economic Forum, who used to have a section on their strategic intelligence website for the Great Reset. It's since been removed. But look at some of the things that they have for the Great Reset. They have these different aspects, harnessing the fourth industrial revolution. This is exactly what was on the World Economic Forum website. This is what they're talking about. This is what their conference is. And they've had several conferences, meetings, Zoom calls, et cetera, where global leaders, elites in business and politics have gotten together to talk about the Great Reset. Restoring the health of the environment. That's a big deal. This is a digital passport, if you will, for the COVID-19 to show that you've either had you might get this if you have a negative COVID test, or you have a recovered immunity from COVID or a vaccination. And this digital green certificate, this is what the EU is talking about. That's all part of this. You see how they're taking the health aspect and they're merging it with data and information. I think we've seen the building blocks, certainly, of that beast system that's going to monitor these things. We also have redesigning social contracts, skills, and jobs. Klaus Schwab himself wrote a book. You don't come out with a book this thick overnight. COVID-19, the Great Reset. Now is the time for a Great Reset, their website said. One article, since modified by title, has said, you'll own nothing and be happy. And the person said, well, I was just throwing some ideas around. Listen, I was born at night, but not last night. They even used the Sesame Street character, Grover and others, to push for this thing on the Great Reset. Hello, everybody. I'm here with some very important tips to help you stay healthy. Pound caring for each other. So we see this merging of data and technology and everything, all tied in large part to the virus and the vaccine. Here's what the Moderna CEO said a couple years ago about the Moderna technology. They have one of the leading vaccines for the COVID, one of the two-shot things. Here's what he said about how Moderna viewed what they were doing.
I'm here today to tell you that we're actually hacking the software of life, and that it's changing the way we think about prevention and treatment of disease. If you think about what it is we're trying to do, we've taken information and our understanding of that information and how that information is transmitted in a cell, and we've taken our understanding of medicine and how to make drugs, and we're fusing the two. We think of it as information therapy.
And then here's this, I won't play the video. Here's a video that was on 60 Minutes just 2 weeks ago on April 11th. You can still find it on the website. It talked about a chip that's been developed, a gel really, that's put in the arm of a soldier, and then they are able to monitor the symptoms of that soldier and determine whether he has COVID symptoms. In fact, what the doctor that put this out said, we'll know you have COVID before you even realize you have symptoms, because we're monitoring and tracking your health data. What happened to health privacy? This information is all uploaded to the cloud. It's then analyzed by artificial intelligence and computers. And then everybody always says, oh, don't worry, we'll respect your privacy. I'm not really buying that. I don't think that that's true. This was developed by the defense, it's called DARPA in the United States. And this is what they plan to do. In fact, well, you can watch, here's just a clip of one of the doctors talking about a conference a couple of years ago about what this information might be able to do.
In 2017, Dr. Crow entered a DARPA grant competition to produce antibody antidotes fast enough to stop a pandemic. Dr. Matt Hepburn described the program at a TED Talk last year.
20,000 doses in 60 days. Basically, we're talking about engineering antibodies that are so effective that you get near immediate protection once they're administered, and you interrupt transmission in those communities. If you can interrupt it, then potentially you can head off the pandemic.
Listen, there's a lot of concerns about the vaccines. I don't have time to go into that in my talk, but certainly these things have been rolled out very quickly with, in my view, inadequate testing or incomplete testing with new technology, and what people don't understand are the side effects. And so you see these articles every day telling you, look, these are normal side effects, you should expect side effects, et cetera, et cetera. But this is all part of the new system that's coming, the building blocks, ultimately for the V system that are being put in place. Back in 2018 at Davos, a guy named Harari, Dr. Harari from Tel Aviv University, his specialty is medieval history, did one of the most fascinating talks, Will the Future Be Human? And look at the imagery that's used in this talk. What will the future look like? And the image there that almost looks like a picture of Jesus in the background looking over him as he's talking about that. He also talked about the information that's uploaded to the cloud, your fingerprint ID, and then this Chinese computer that analyzes and tracks everything in the social credit system in China. I'll talk about that in just a moment, but briefly in just a moment. But here's a little bit of what Dr. Harari said at his talk at Davos 2018.
Within a century or two, Earth will be dominated by entities that are more different from us than we are different from Neanderthals or from chimpanzees. Because in the coming generations, we will learn how to engineer bodies and brains and minds. These will be the main products of the economy, of the 21st century economy. Not textiles and vehicles and weapons, but bodies and brains and minds. Now, how exactly will the future masters of the planet look like? This will be decided by the people who own the data. Those who control the data control the future not just of humanity, but the future of life itself. Because today, data is the most important asset in the world. In ancient times, land was the most important asset. And if too much land became concentrated in too few hands, humanity split into aristocrats and commoners. Then in the modern age, in the last 2 centuries, machinery replaced land as the most important asset. And if too many of the machines became concentrated in too few hands, humanity split into classes, into capitalists and proletariats.
Well, he goes on to say that what's going to happen is it's going to be difficult in the future to even determine what is humanity, what is human. He said that in medieval history, at least the serf was able to provide services to the lord of the manor. But what happens when people don't have the skills to participate in a data intelligence, artificial intelligence, computer technology-based thing? They won't be worth anything to anyone. They'll be worse than the serfs were in the Dark Ages. This has huge implications. And then he went on, he wrote an article in about a year ago in the Financial Times in the UK where he talked about the world after coronavirus, and he talked about this virus, the data. And he said in his article that the coronavirus epidemic is a major test of citizenship. At Davos in 2018, he was asked a question, what do you think of the future? And he says, well, if they tell you about the world of 2050 and it sounds like science fiction, it's probably not true. But if they tell you about the world of 2050 and it does not sound like science fiction, it's definitely not true. So we're living at a time where things are accelerating, converging so quickly, things that a lot of us never thought that we would see. Now, the social credit, real quickly about this because I'm almost out of time. In early 2018, just before Dr. Harari's talk, Wired magazine did an article on the social credit system in China. And that was followed up by a great video that Australian TV did about the social credit system. And they did great graphics. They show everybody walking around with their social credit score. But this is actually the reality. In China, there are a couple 100 million. They want to raise it up to 600 or 700 million cameras tracking everything. If you cross the street improperly, your social credit score gets dinged. And to the point where eventually, and they focus on one individual who was critical of this Chinese system, a journalist, He went to buy something, went to buy a high-speed rail ticket. He couldn't buy it because his social credit score was too low. This is happening with conservatives and other people. They're being locked out of the system. For example, I got a white paper recently from a tech company. This is from Experian, a credit agency. 2020 State of Alternative Credit Data. And they're looking at all these things about traditional credit data contains case information about a consumer's credit behavior. It may not be enough for a lender to formulate a complete evaluation of their stability and risk. So you see how they're incorporating all of this social credit thing. They don't even need the government to require it. They're doing it on their own because they think this is the way to control things, to make themselves better, to have a better humanity. But if you're not on board with everything that their woke capitalism and stakeholder capitalism is on board, you're going to be excluded from the system. JP Morgan Chase, one of the largest banks in the world, has a new app out that tracks your carbon footprint. What do you think they're going to do? JP Morgan Chase, what do they care about your carbon footprint? Thought they were to loan money to steel mills to make billions. Now they're worried about your social credit, your carbon footprint. Where is this heading? We all know where this is heading. It's obvious. Now we have this thing called the vaccine passport. This is being rolled out in Israel. People are showing this. You have to do this to get, as this one person, Bloomberg Business says this, it's a ticket to freedom for people who have been vaccinated to resume some of their normal lives. Paper digital vaccine certificates are not enough. It needs to be digital QR codes. This is the vaccination credential initiative. Interesting part of this, if you look at one line in one of the code source things that you break down, it's called babel.config.js. I just thought that was interesting. It kind of stuck out at me. There's a thing called the Common Pass that's coming. It's partnership with the World Economic Forum. It's to get people back traveling so we don't see this. There are concerns, though, about the technology and the privacy and how this will be used, and those are legitimate concerns. Naomi Wolf, who's no conservative, she was on the Eric Metaxas show the other day talking about this. She's been sounding the alarm. Look, she's a feminist. I would call her a classic liberal. Here's what she said about where is this vaccine passport thing going?
Now, vaccine passports, I will share the warning that I've been sleeplessly sharing for about 10 days now, since the Biden administration floated the trial balloon that they're going to be, backing vaccine passports. And this is a global rollout. I can't stress this enough. Denmark was forced into vaccine passports. Israel was the bellwether 4 months ago, got vaccine passports, and within 4 months, it's destroyed civil society. Activists face 360-degree surveillance. Nobody is free to challenge it. Parents are being told their own vaccine passports will be switched off unless they allow their children to be vaccinated.
Hold on. Say that again. That is so sick. I cannot get over it. Please say, what country did that happen in?
So it's Israel is the first kind of petri dish for Pfizer, basically aligning with the Netanyahu government to roll out a full biosecurity state via vaccine passports. So Israelis have to show their vaccination passport, which is digital. Why is it not a piece of paper, which wouldn't have all these problems? I will explain. But it's digital in order to get food at the grocery store. All right. And of course, as I've been warning people, there's no such thing like the vaccine passport is the social credit system that China has. It doesn't lead to it. It is that because it takes no engineering. It takes literally a flick of the back end. And I'm talking as a tech CEO, so stop me if nothing's clear, but it takes no special addition to merge your Google Wallet or your Apple Pay or your PayPal with your vaccine status.
We're going to go to a break here, but in closing, let me sum up. This is out of the pit of hell.
And you see it. This is just one aspect where we have acceleration, convergence, logistics, understanding. All of this is happening at the same time. This is just one little tiny chunk of Bible prophecy. We have all the same things happening in geopolitics and that sort of thing. This is what the Great Reset is all about. Now, is this the beast system yet? No, but we see the beginnings of it here. This is troubling stuff. And then I think Naomi Wolf is exactly correct. And so maybe the line of code that everybody's going to have to do to switch on everything is this one, babel.config. I don't know. Maybe that's the one. That's the back end. Listen, my folks, or listen, my friends, we live at a very unique time. I've used this video many times. This is Boxing Day, Thailand, about 2004, 2005. There's been a massive earthquake in Indonesia, one of the strongest recorded, that's killed between 250 and 300,000 people, and then 800 to 1,000 miles away in Thailand, here comes the tsunami. People are out. The water is drained out of the bay, and everybody's going, oh, look over there. It's really neat. We can see the things. And then somebody notices, wait a minute, what's up with those waves? What is that? And you'll see the people, the locals, they know what's coming. You'll see them, they're running for the hills. Somebody says, well, is that from the earthquake? Is that a tsunami? No. Oh, maybe it is a tsunami. And they say, man, we got to warn the people about what's coming. And you'll see this one guy, he's standing in the bay. You can kind of see the locals starting to run to get away. And the tourists are just standing there. Oh, look at the big wave. We have to tell them. We have to warn them. And then you see this guy standing in the bay, watching the tsunami coming. First gradually, then suddenly. And he's standing there. You'll see him here in just a second. You know that he's gone. He's entered eternity. My friends, this is a perfect picture of the times in which we live. We are seeing the beginnings of the tsunami of God's judgment come upon the world, and we cannot stand by and do nothing. We have to declare to people the whole counsel of God, including everything that it says about Bible prophecy. And as we get closer, we'll have a better understanding how this is going to work out. But the time is now to start warning people. The tsunami of God's judgment is coming. We need to share the gospel with people. We need to disciple to them. We need to disciple them with the truth of the Word of God and the whole counsel of God. The time is now. We live at the time where it's accelerating, it's converging. The logistics are there, and we're having understanding. The time is now. Thank you so much for your time. I apologize for going a little bit over, but God bless.